Good afternoon, classmates. Good afternoon, Sir Javes. We are the group PCAR Part 7, and today we're going to tackle and understand the contents of PCAR Part 7, Instrument and Equipment. So, what are the contents or the objectives of today's discussion? First is to recognize the contents of PCAR Part 7, to understand each section and determine its relevance to the aviation industry, rules, and regulation, and to make a conclusion on why all the sections are significant to our learnings in Philippine air laws.
So here are the following contents that we are gonna be talking about here in PICAR Part 7. We have PICAR Part 7.1 General, PICAR Part 7.7 the flight recorders, PICAR Part 7.8 Emergency Rescue and Survival Equipment, PICAR Part 7.9 are the miscellaneous system and equipment, and PICAR Part 7 Implementing Standards or the IS. So first for PICAR Part 7.1 or the General, PICAR Part 7.1.1, the applicability is, in this part is where aircraft operators must know the minimum requirements needed for all aircraft before it can fly. AOC holders have requirements to be followed according to the aircraft type and shall be issued with an individual certificate of airworthiness upon any aircraft type. And in addition, it shall meet the airworthiness requirements and the equipments that are needed in order to be issued with a certificate of airworthiness. So here are the following abbreviations that we will be encountering along our discussion. So this is PICAR Part 7.1.3. So all these abbreviations shall be located inside the aircraft and the aircraft shall carry for navigation and communication purposes. So part of PICAR Part 7.1 is PICAR Part 7.1.4, which talks about the general instrument and equipment requirements. So it is said here, all aircraft before flying and before the pilot uses an aircraft, it is important for the equipment inside to be in operable condition and important to perform inspection programs, especially when the aircraft is not registered in the Republic of the Philippines. In addition, the aircraft operator must not commit to flying if there is failure to communication and navigational instruments of the aircraft. So another part of PICAR Part 7.7 is PICAR Part 7.7.1.1. It talks about the construction and installation of flight recorders. So for the construction and installation of flight recorders, this must be in the safest part of the aircraft. Or it is usual, to be specific, it is located at the tail side of the aircraft. It is to avoid the loss of information, to be preserved, and to be transcribed. There are different color codings for the type of flight recorders. First is the non-deployable flight recorder. This must have a color of orange or yellow color, and while an automatic deployable flight recorder must have an orange in a yellow or orange one, and must have an automatic and an activated ELT or emergency locator transmitter. So in addition to PICAR Part 7.7.1.1, in correct construction and installation is important and it must be installed to reduce the probability of damage of the flight recorder in case of an accident happens, and to be minimized, and to receive maximum power from the bus. Now next is for the PICAR Part 7.7.1.2 or the operation of flight recorders. Operation of flight recorders, the most important part is that the flight recorder shall never be switched off during flight. And in order to preserve the data of flight upon completion of flight, it shall be deactivated if any emergency occurs. Note that all flight recorders are for the investigators to determine what happened. So here are the types or the duration of the flight recorders, depending on the type. So this is PICAR Part 7.7.2.4. FDRs shall be capable of retaining the information recorded during the last. If your FDR is Type 1 and Type 2, there is a 25-hour of operation that must be retained. Type 2A, 30 minutes of operation. And Type 4 and Type 4A and Type 5, data is retained for 10.
PICAR Part 7.8.1 talks about emergency equipment in all aircraft. Siguro napaka-basic naman na nito ay napaka-common gawin sa bawat aircraft na sasakyan natin is dapat meron talaga siyang emergency equipment. Siyempre, Itong emergency equipment, what it does is to help us whenever a disaster or catastrophe happens. Kumbaga, ito yung tumutulong sa atin to last in that catastrophe if ever something really bad happens. So, number one, dapat readily accessible siya sa lahat ng crew members and if ever, dapat meron din siyang nakalagay sa passenger compartment para kahit papaano, pag walang crew na malapit, merong passenger na kayang i-operate yung mga ganitong gamit. Number two is dapat identifiable siya and clearly marked for indication kung paano ba siya gamitin or para saan siya. Like for example, ang med kit, di ba meron dun parang medical sign. So, ibig sabihin nun, it's for medical purposes, mga pang bandage, ganon, mga gamot. So, dapat may ganon. Number three is dapat marked as date of last inspection. Dapat lahat ng gamit ng ating emergency equipment is ini-inspect. Dapat alam natin kung expired na ba yung ibang gamit dito, kung pwede pa siyang gamitin, or gumagana pa siya. Napaka-importante ron na gumagana siya. And lastly is dapat mark as contents when carried in a compartment or container. The car part 7.8.2 talks about the emergency exit equipment. Napaka-importante ng emergency exits lalo na sa ating mga eroplano kasi 'di ba not all times naman naglaland ng eroplano sa runway. If emergency talaga siya, minsan naglaland sa tubig, minsan naglaland sa field. So, these are often used naman for emergencies if hindi na kaya magland ng eroplano sa isang runway. So, number one is, kahit anong eroplano that has 6 feet clearance from the ground, nakalabas na yung landing gear nito, has approved means to assist the occupants in descending to the ground. Siyempre, para mas madaling makababa yung mga pasahero, mas okay na rin na meron nag-a-assist sa baba. Next is each passenger emergency exit is means of access and its means of opening should be usually marked by a sign. So this is made naman para makita ng mga pasahero kung saan sila pupunta, di ba? Isa kasi pag nagpapanik na nakakalito, at least itong mga marks na to gives them an idea on where to go and how to exit the airplane as peacefully as possible. Number three is each passenger carrying aircraft should have an emergency lighting system. So napaka-importante ng ilaw lalo na pag nasa loob tayo ng cabin. So the number one is it should illuminate each passenger's exit marking and locating sign. Kapag kunyari madilim na, syempre kailangan makita ng mga pasahero kung saan sila pupunta, kung ano yung mark neto na ganyan. Next is to provide enough general lighting for the passenger in the cabin. Sabi ko nga, mahirap pag sobrang dilim sa loob ng cabin. As in, madilim talaga ito lalo na pag nakababa yung blinds. And lastly is to include for proximity emergency escape path marking. Each passenger emergency exit shall have instructions for opening the exit from the outside, clearly marked on the outside of the door. So when emergency landing is needed, kailangan meron na naman tayong markings sa labas ng pintuan para syempre alam ng mga nasa labas kung paano siya bubuksan pag di na kayang buksan sa loob. And lahat naman to ginawa para for the safety of each passenger when it comes to emergencies. So, the car part 7.8.3 talks about visual signaling devices. Basically, ito yung ginagamit sa mga emergency search and rescue, lalo na pag sa tubig. Nakasaad dito na no person may operate an aircraft over water or across land areas which have been designated by the Republic of the Philippines kung wala itong visual signaling devices. Ngayon bakit? Kasi syempre kapag wala tayong visual signal devices sa ating aeroplano, mas magiging mahirap ang search and rescue. Sabihin natin gabi, di ba? Kapag wala tayong visual signaling devices, napakahirap nito. So, number one, it should include visual signals for use by intercepting intercepted aircraft and at least one pyrotechnic signaling device for each life raft required for overwater operations. The Carport 7.8.13 talks about protective breathing equipment or also known as PBEs. Ngayon ano nga ba yung PBEs? Alam niyo yung sa mga movies, pag nagkakaroon ng turbulence yung aeroplano or parang kinukulangan na sa oxygen yung aeroplano, ay may lumalabas sa mga breather dun sa ulo ng mga tao. Ayun yun, ayun yung mga protective breathing equipments. So much so, kahit sa mga ganung bagay, meron din tayong rules and regulations na kailangan sundin. The number one rule is, bawal na bawal lumipad ang aeroplano kapag nag-exceed to sa maximum certified mass takeoff nito, which is 5,700 kilograms, or having a maximum approved seating configuration of more than 19 seats. So, syempre, Weight is such a huge thing when it comes to flying, no? Hindi porket malaking eroplano, eh, dapat mabigat na rin siya. As much as possible, ginagaanan natin yung eroplano para mas maging efficient yung flying natin. But unless the PBEs has protection for the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and each flight crew member while on flight deck duty, and to provide oxygen for a period of not less than 15 minutes, ibig sabihin, pwede naman siya. Basta, lagyan lang tayo ng precautionary measures. Second is the oxygen supply for PBE may be provided by the required supplemental oxygen system. So as much as possible, dapat talaga na enough to para sa lahat ng tao on board. Kasi naman kulangan, di ba mas okay na yung sumobra. And the PBE intended for flight crew use shall be conveniently located on the flight deck and be easily accessible for immediate use. So yan, placement. Napaka-important talaga ng placement kahit sa anong bagay, and especially safety procedures. Napaka-important talaga ng placement. So the next one is the PPE intended for the cabin crew usually be installed adjacent. So as much as possible, yung gamit ng ating cabin crew is dapat malapit kang sa kanila since syempre para mas madali nila makuha hindi na sila mag-panic if ever kailanganin na. The next one is dapat adjacent rin siya near fire extinguishers or kapag nasa loob ng cargo compartment yung fire extinguishers natin, dapat naka-stowed outside pero adjacent pa rin sa entrance. And lastly is that the PBE use shall not prevent required communication. So, dapat kahit habang nakasuot yung PBE or ginagamit siya, nakakapagsalita pa din yung sino man kailangan magsalita for required communication. The Corpor 7.8.17 talks about life rafts. Ngayon, ano nga ba yung life rafts? Life rafts are inflatable like mini boats na ginagamit whenever a plane emergency lands on water. Ngayon, ginagamit to tuwing nasa tubig na yung eroplano. And ang purpose nito is to remove all the passengers that is on board and ilipat sila sa life rafts para mas safe. So, life-saving rafts in sufficient numbers to carry all persons on board shall be installed in all airplanes when operating in extended overwater operations. Dapat Class 1 and Class 2 helicopters, meron din nito, and that the distance from land that they should be corresponding for more than 10 minutes at normal cruise speed. Class C helicopters when they have operated over water beyond rotational or safe forced landing distance from land. So, dapat in all aircrafts, merong life-saving rafts, no? Kasi, once na walang life-saving rafts ang aeroplano, paano yan kapag nag-emergency landing ng isang plane sa tubig, edi wala, lunod, di ba? So, napaka-importante nito, ito nitong life rafts sa bawat airplane na masasakyan natin in the future. All life-saving rafts shall be stowed so as to facilitate the ready use in an emergency. Dapat once na kailangan tong gamitin, ready na siya agad. Alam niyo yung pag binubuksan siya, mag-inflate na siya agad. Dapat ganun kabilis since syempre kailangan mabilis tayong gumalaw whenever an emergency strikes. Life raft shall be equipped with the following sustaining equipment. So syempre kahit sa life raft meron din tayong mga emergency tools na pwedeng gamitin para if ever mas stranded tayo sa life raft na yon, meron tayong mga gamit in order for us to last. So number one is an electric locator light. Number two is a survival kit equipped with accordance with requirements of subsection 7.8.4. And lastly, a pyrotechnical signaling device. In helicopters, life rafts are not deployable by remote control and which have a mass for more than 40 kilograms shall be equipped with the means of mechanically assisted deployment. The car part 7.9.1 talks about seats, safety belts, and shoulder harnesses. Ngayon, ano nga ba itong mga bagay na to? Basically, ito yung mga kinakabit natin sa katawan natin before an airplane lands and whenever an airplane is about to take off. Ito yung tinuturo ng mga flight attendant, no? Bago mag-take off ang aeroplano, yung parang may kinakabit-kabit pa silang ganun. Ngayon, napaka-importante na itong mga bagay na to since kapag wala to sa loob ng aeroplano, kakalas tayo basically pag nag-landing siya ka nag-take off. So, kahit dito, may rules and regulations na dapat sinusunod ang bawat aircraft in order for everyone's safety. Number one is the seat with a safety belt for each person over age of 2 years old and a restraining belt for each berth on board the aircraft. So, dapat kompleto lahat ng to. Meron dito sa belt, di ba? Sa upuan natin, dapat meron. And next is the safety harness for each flight crew member seat. So siguro naman aware tayo kung ano yung itsura nun kasi whenever we enter an airplane, andun yung sa harapan may pagalan sa kanila, nakapalibot sa katawan nila since syempre nasa pinakaharap sila dapat talagang naka-lock in sila doon. And a safety harness for each pilot shall incorporate a device that will automatically restrain the occupant's torso. The safety harness for each pilot, which includes shoulder straps, a seat belt, should incorporate a device to prevent suddenly incapacitated pilot for interfering with the flight controls. So, importante yun, syempre, sila yung nagkokontrol ng aeroplano, dapat komportable sila and bukod doon, kailangan meron silang, may madali lang siyang kalasin ng biglaan ng ganun. And forward gear facing within 15 degrees of the longitudinal axis of the airplane, seat equipped with a safety harness for each cabin crews member stationed in a passenger compartment. And lastly is the cabin crew member seat shall be located near floor level and other emergency exits for emergency evacuation. The car part 7.9.10 talks about pilot heat indication system. So dito naman nakalagay kung ano yung mga kailangang rules susundin pag when it comes to heat indication systems. So number one is the indication provided shall incorporate an amber light. This is in clear of a view on a flight crew member. Next, the indication provided shall be designed to alert the flight crew if either the pilot heating system is switched off or the pilot heating system is switched on, or in any pilot tube heating element is incorporated. So, ayun, again, kailangan may indication pa din when it comes to using heat indication systems para malaman ng flight crew if ever bang kailangan nito or kailangan na siyang gamitin. Moving on with Picard, part 7.9.12 is basically the windshield wipers. No AOC holder may operate an airplane with a maximum certified takeoff mass of again 5,700 kilograms unless if it is equipped with each pilot station with a windshield wiper, or equivalent means to maintain a clear portion of the windshield during precipitation. Malaking importance ng windshield wipers, especially sa pilot's point of view para, syempre, paano sila makakapagpalipad kung di nila nakita yung harapan nila. So, napakalaking bagay ng windshield wipers for our pilots. And lastly, sa Picard Part 7.9.13 is the chart holder. So, no AOC holder may operate an aircraft unless the chart holder is installed in an easily readable position which can be illuminated for night operations. So, dapat kitang-kita siya whenever whatever happens, and kapag gabi dapat meron siyang ilaw para syempre visible siya dun sa titingin.
So now another part of PICAR Part 7 are the implementing standards. So PICAR Part 7.7.2.2 talks about the aircraft equipage for operations, aircraft data recording system or the ADRS. So an aircraft recorder must be capable of recording the following data of flight parameters. It is important because it helps the investigators translate it to engineering units. Below is a table that shows the flight parameter records or the different engineering units that they use. 7.7.2.2 Aircraft Equipage for Operations or Aircraft Data Recording System or the ADRS. First, for emergency locator transmitter. All aircrafts must have this device depending on the type of aircraft and the number of passengers it can carry. A small aircraft must have at least one large commercial aircrafts must have at least two, at least one automatic or at least one manual. Another part of PICAR Part 7 implementing standards is PICAR Part 7.8.4, which talks about the survival equipments, flights over land or over water. So, first, survival equipment for aircrafts in case of any emergency on land. We have must survival kits and proper crew member training. Next is for in case of an emergency on water, we must have lifeboats, radar reflectors, and essential equipment to survive with life vests. And also, proper cabin crew member training. And now for the last part of our PICAR Part 7 implementing standards is PICAR Part 7.9.14. For the last part, we have the cosmic radiation equipment. So this equipment is important for the communicational purposes of the aircraft and radar contact. It helps locate an aircraft when it cannot be seen from the radar or it cannot be contacted through traffic. And if there is need to find an aircraft that sends cosmic rays to the aircraft controllers which help contact the aircraft and locate the aircraft.